So let's move on to our subject for tonight. And we're going back to TV. We're going back to picture quality because we've got Jules on the podcast now. For those of you who don't know, Jules is a professional calibrator. He not only calibrates consumer TVs, he's also in studios, professional environments, and calibrates professional grading monitors as well as the domestic side of things. So a real mix of work that you have there, Jules. And obviously there's a whole audio side that we'll get onto at some point in the future, but let's stick to displays. So you go into grading suites where the professionals work, where all this work gets done in terms of making sure the colors are correct and that they pull the shadows that you're supposed to see and hide things that you're not supposed to see and so on. But these are done in professional environments, Jules, which is normally pretty dim. And maybe we maybe have viewing rooms where that would be the case. You can see the room behind me where I test the majority of TVs. It's a normal living room, white walls and so on. We don't all live in grading suites. So what are we missing out on, and how do we make sure that we're still getting the full experience from our display?
Yeah, well, obviously, reference content is made in reference rooms. If you go into a grading suite, as you say, it's dark, very dark. In fact, standards organizations like SMPTE actually have a specification for the ambient, the amount of ambient light should have, or in that room, 5 nits. Then it's dark decor. It's certainly neutral decor, so there's no red walls or anything like that. It's everything is done in that room to make sure that nothing is interdicting with the ability of the colorist, the grader, to see the content exactly as it should be seen. And the standards, obviously, for SDR, when you're calibrating those displays, 100 nits peak output, 2.4 gamma, also for bias lighting as well. If you go into a grading studio, there will be a bias light behind the TV, and it's not TV behind the monitor, and it's not funky disco lights or anything like that. It is D65 calibrated light at 5 nits maximum. Used to be 10% of peak brightness. Some people still argue that's probably a better option, but it's now fixed 5 nits on the bias light. And if you want to see the content in your home as accurately as possible, you're going to do what you can to replicate that environment. So again, switch, putting the lights down, making sure that there's no sort of reflections. Some people can do that, some people can't. I'm lucky to have a demo room, my room, where it's all black fabric walls and everything. There's nothing like that. My living room's completely different. That's where my wife rules. So unfortunately, I can't do things like that. In that's white walls, like most of the living rooms I go into to calibrate. And do what you can to lower those light levels, particularly with HDR. And the reason is because what you can do with SDR, because it's graded to 100 nits and you've got TVs that are capable of a hell of a lot more output than that, is that you can actually increase the light output. So you can go from 100 nits to 150 nits, depending upon the amount of ambient light in the room. The other thing that you would probably do in terms of calibrating, if there's significant ambient light, is again, you'd adjust the gamma output. So although reference gamma is 2.4, you might want to drop to 2.3, 2.2 for a brighter room, because that's going to elevate the shadow detail that are otherwise going to be occluded by the ambient light in the room. So there's things you can do for SDR to adjust for a non-reference environment. But HDR, you can't really, because there's no way that most TVs are already flat out, foot to the floor, and they still can't get to 1,000 nits that the content's been graded to. So where can you go? It's not as if you can increase it. So I see a lot of people on forums complaining that the HDR is too dark. And the answer is your room's too bright. And particularly what we said last week, Phil, about shadow detail and how we see, we always bang on about peak output, don't we, on displays for HDR. But in fact, the shadow detail is just as, if not more important, to see. And if you've got too much ambient light in the room, you won't be able to see it. And unlike with SDR, there's nowhere we can go. So for HDR, it really is important to do what you can to create more of a reference environment. But SDR, we've got things we can do, but HDR, we're a bit stuck.
It's one of those problems, isn't it? That there's some of us who nitpick, and we get our rooms right, and we get the right color of grey on the walls and so on. And believe me, I have a pot of paint sitting to do the room next door, the cinema room, in the right grading sweet grey, and it does exist. You can find the color out there, you can find the code, and you can go and get the paint mixed. And so there's those of us who I'd imagine a large number of AVForums members are the same, and want to go for that with the viewing environments. But like you say, the vast majority of people, you're going to have a room like I'm sitting in at the moment with white walls and so on, and that's where we're going to run into problems going forward, like you say, with HDR and so on, where, how do you balance out the picture with the room and make sure that you're still seeing content the way it's supposed to be seen? Now, some of the technologies out there, Jules, have tried to get around this and combat this, and I'm thinking about Dolby Vision IQ and filmmaker mode on Panasonic TVs that use the light sensor as well. Now, this is new technology. This is not a light sensor that you would find on a TV from a couple of years ago, which just elevated the greys and the blacks and just made things look that little bit brighter in a bright room. This actually uses the light sensor, but it also uses the metadata that's within the content to try and keep the color volume correct, to try and keep the saturation right, to try and keep white balance correct, but also add that extra boost in brightness to combat the viewing conditions. Is that the right way to head to try and get around these issues?
That's a difficult one, Phil. I'd always prefer, if I could, to control my environment first. But I guess, look, if something's too dim to see, it's too dim to see, and if it helps you see the content then I suppose it is a route to go. I'm always, we're all a little bit OCD and anal about these things. I'm always keen to control the environment as much as I can first. But I guess, if it's a case of seeing something or not seeing something, then yeah, I mean, it is an option. But you have to deliberately break the EOTF in order to do that, which kind of feels, as a calibrator, it feels like, you're breaking the law. But you gotta, you want to, if you can't see it, then what's the point?
Yeah.
So it's all about enjoying the TV programs, the movies that we like. And if it's too dark, you've got to do something. I suppose it maybe, I don't know whether this is about, dialogue in movies, where people complain they can't hear the dialogue anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, but to be fair, there's don't get the films team started on this. I mean, there's as much an argument that directors now shun boom mics. So, I mean, that essentially the people mixing it, they aren't doing anything different. They're just working with more and more shonky distance mic work, and then just randomly you get television series which are just incomprehensibly badly done. So there's all sorts of pulls in that one. But you're right. Yeah, you end up often with center speaker settings which are significantly adrift of what the notional optimum would be.
And in terms of the visual side of things as well, I mean, you have to break the EQ, the OTF in order to do that. Where a room is too bright for the content. So they're trying to find solutions for this, aren't they? But I'd always go with the preference of, if you can, do what you can to control your environment, because you want to see reference environment as best as possible. Yeah.
And of course, there are ways now, like I was just saying and alluding to, the paint colors. There are nice paints out there which can work, that can lower the light level in a room, still look nice for the partner or whoever you are sharing your environment with, and it keeps everybody happy. But you can also extract more performance out of your display by just approaching things like that, like we've discussed in the past, Ed, with audio and so on, correct placement of absorption material and so on. And it doesn't need to be, the blocks that I've got on the wall behind me here, proper sound absorbent blocks. You can make them look really nice. And
it doesn't have to be a brutal studio-like environment. It can be. It's amazing what you can get done within the realms of taste and decency, which is a catch-all phrase, really, isn't it? But nevertheless, it is true. There's plenty you can do, and there's also, if you go onto the forums, there's plenty of people that have done various permutations of it. Generally speaking, it's probably fair to say in the overall lifespan of AVForums that you are not going to be trying something which hasn't been tried before. There will be data on it, and you can normally see how good or bad an idea it is before you crack on with it.
And that's just where I was going. It's almost like you read my mind, Ed. Well, we have forums there. We have DIY forums, home cinema DIY forums, and so on. Our members invented the media wall. This media wall that all these DIY companies are now offering you, they'll come and build around your chimney with your monitor. And our guys were doing that decades ago with lighting and all the rest of it. So if you want ideas on how to, make your room a little bit more suited to a little bit more like a media room, where you can control the colors a little bit in terms of wall color and so on, get the light levels down so you can enjoy your displays and of course the audio side as well. You can do it all. Then head over to the DIY forums. There's lots of projects in there. There's lots of things that forum members have done over the 20 odd years that we've been around on AV forums. And like Ed says, somebody will have tried it. If you've thought of it, somebody will have tried it on AV forums. There will be a thread about it somewhere with feedback and ideas and so on. And it's a great resource. It's where I found the paint code for the paint that I'm going to put in the main media room that I'm building next door to shoot our videos and so on. You can do this stuff. You can go into your local Dulux or whatever and give them the code, and they'll mix the paint for you.
Is it grey? Is it grey, Phil?
It is grey, yes.
Yeah. Well, grey's in fashion, isn't it?
It is. Actually, that's what I was saying. It very much so in fashion at the minute. And you can get the right shade, which doesn't need to be really black, but grey does soak the light. It will take the light out of the room and help with things. So there's lots of advice on AV forums. Go find it. Let us know how you get on as well. If you've got issues with this and you found a solution that works for you and you think it's worth other people looking at, get a thread up on the forums and tell us about it in the chat window on the podcast, and we'll add it into our discussions.